This is Groundeffected. My name is your dad, and this week I've taken up sculpting on my iPad. It's no secret that I've done my fair share of 3D printing, and artwork from artists all around the world pretty much adorn my shop. I literally have shelves and shelves and shelves of all of these things. And as a professional artist myself, I figured it's my turn to try my hand at pushing around the digital clay. Now, as you can imagine, as with any art form, it's really easy to do this. All you have to do is just... and all you gotta do is... that's it. Now, I may not have hair on the top of my head, but all the hair that's on my chin is about to be pulled out for how difficult this actually is. What you may or may not know about sculpting the models that we 3D print and paint and everything pretty much that is ever needed to be made digitally, it all starts out as a ball like this. Part of that's a lie because it can also start out as a square. Either way, you really need to start out with sculpting the thing. And when I say sculpting it, I mean every single last piece has to be sculpted. When I first started 3D printing and making sculpts and actually making a channel, I had drawn up this spider snail because I really like snails as a thing. And I asked someone to help me sculpt this many years ago, but obviously people are really busy running their own lives. But now, I have made him a reality. And I know I laugh at this, and in reality it's no small feat, but also, it's terrible. What I've learned is that sculpting is not as easy as it seems. It really does feel like the computer will do everything for you, until you try to do it for yourself. The annoying thing about any creative business or job or anything that you do that is creative, that requires computers to create these things, is that the general consensus of the public is that the computer does most of the work. And let me tell you right now, that is not the case when it comes to any of these things, but very specifically, at least in my case, using Nomad Sculpt, the computer didn't help at all. Now, this is an app called Procreate. This is an app in which I draw on my iPad how I would normally draw on pieces of paper. But even using apps like this, I'm still seeing it all over the internet where people say, oh, but the computer helps you to draw because you need to draw on paper because drawing on paper is the real word. And while yes, traditional artwork is really good, I have loads of artworks around my studio from artists that I really love. This one is from Tony Ciavara, and this is a clearly digital drawing by Bex Lowe. And I'm not even gonna lie, I don't even know who that is, but that's a really cool freaking artwork. This one was drawn by hand by an artist whom is gonna hate me because I can't remember his name either. Rays. His name is Rays. And that is also not digitally drawn, but I don't see any difference in my mind between that and that as being an artwork that I like personally. Nor does that actually negate the skills that it takes to be able to create such artworks, even if you have a computer helping you maybe smooth one of your lines. Now that my stupid rant is over, basically computer doesn't help. It makes it more difficult because when I'm using clay with my hands know what they're doing in real life. But my brain doesn't know what any of these freaking tools at all do. And that is because the computer has got more brains than I do. So this means the biggest learning curve really is how to use those tools. But it does not take away the fact that you still need to understand how shapes and things work in order to 3D sculpt. In much the same way, you still need to understand how to draw something in order to draw it digitally. And as I look around my studio at some of the sculpts that I have in here and the skills which it's taken to be able to do some of this work, I really am a little bit daunted by my task ahead. Usually this is the part of the video where the content creator shows you their entire journey on how they got to the process of what they did. I didn't do that, and I have a very good reason for this. And this is because genuinely, I have no idea what I'm doing, and I'm obviously terrified of taking on something new that I have no idea what I'm doing in. So I did all of this in my spare time, at home, sitting in bed next to my wife. I practiced sculpting, and I'm not gonna lie, the first one is terrible. The unfortunate thing is that's the one I decided to make into my spider snail. Sculpt. One thing that I know as an artist is that if you want to get good at something, you need to practice it. And my first snail may have looked a little bit weird, but by the time I'd gotten to my second snail, I'd already started to learn how to do certain things that I couldn't do the first time I'd tried this app. Now, of course, the object of me being able to sculpt is so that I can 3D print things that I've sculpted. I'm not gonna lie, that was probably a very bad transition, but I don't really care. I sculpted this. I personally put my time in to sculpt a little snail. And yes, it's not perfect, let's be honest. But I'd learned some things from the previous attempts, some things like texturing, as well as using the stamp tools, as well as shapes, and making sure that the R's weren't on stalks so skinny that they would just fall off. Now, of course, 3D printing is one thing all on its own, but being able to make your own things that you 3D print, I feel like that's the whole next level. Am I trying to advertise Nomad? No, I am not. They haven't paid me, nor have they ever reached out to me. Nobody but my wife and my patrons know about the fact that I've started sculpting. That's right, my patrons know. That's because over on my Patreon, I give almost daily updates on what I'm doing, what I'm up to, what's happening, and what's coming next. Of course, I also try to give my best impression of helping people, but I'm very busy and it's difficult to get to everybody. However, I do answer everybody as soon as I possibly can. If you are interested in joining my Patreon to support the channel, as well as maybe get in contact, perhaps you needed to see what I was doing next week. Maybe you just wanted to see some of the whips before they come out, then that's the place for you. But for now, if I have enough time, I'm gonna paint up one more of these Spider-Man things so I can show you how I did that, and hopefully this inspires you to maybe start your own 3D printing thing. The files will be available. If you want them, just join the Patreon. Oh, and by the way, since I am a 3D printing channel, I will have them pre-supported for you in STL and in ROXY. No guarantee that they will succeed though. So if we completely ignore the fact that I never showed any of the printing or any of the prep of this model, and just get onto the fact that it was already primed, and now I'm going to give it a zenithal highlight in order to get some brightness into the colors I'm going to put on it, then I can actually start to explain to you how I painted this model. Basically, obviously, I put the zenithal highlight. This is going to make the base layers brighter for the colors that I want to lay on it. This is a cartoon kind of figure, so I need everything to be as bright as possible. This meant that I didn't leave as too much black, because leaving black is going to make the shadows look a little bit grubby, and you want this thing to be super saturated. Well, at least I do. I don't know what you want, but I want it to be saturated. So to get that saturation in, I'm going to lay down some base colors, and I'm going to give them some shadows using the darker variant of that color in a wash. For the shadow on the worm of the snail, I used red because I'm setting up the skin tones for this worm to look like human flesh. But before we talk about that, let me just quickly show you the LED that I put in top here. It's a 3-volt, a very bright one. I don't know which one, but it's a very bright one. I found in my cupboard. I wired it up and stuck those wires in while I waited for those base colors and shadows to dry. And now to add the flesh tones to the worm. Of course, he has eyeballs as well, and I added those flesh tones to the eyeballs too. I pretty much used my latest up-to-date skin tone method, technique, whatever you want to call it, even down to the orcish dermis, which we know we can't find in stock, but I've noticed that more people have been able to find it in stock, so hopefully if you can, that is going to help you to complete the skin tone set. Now to paint the eyeballs, I decided I'm just going to paint them with a purple first. This is to set up the ring around the inside of the eye, and then using deck tan, I'm actually going to come back in and I'm going to paint all the white, it's clearer, to be very scientifically accurate. That is the word for the whites of your eyes. And I'm going to use that pink as a very thin line around the outside of that whiteness of the eyes. I don't know if this is going to look good, but I'm going with it. So let's just hope for the best. To paint the lines that are on the mask, obviously it's a Spider-Man mask on a snail. As weird as that seems, I need to still paint the lines on that, and painting them would be hard. So I drew them on with a permanent marker, which is way easier. Just use this. Screw anyone who says that it's cheating. By the way, those markers can also be used to paint eyeballs. Not the balls of the eye, but the little black part inside of the eyeballs. Also, there is things called Posca pens, which you can also use to add highlights such as white highlights like specular dots and things like that on your models as well. Don't ever let anyone tell you that it's cheating. Cheating is not using the tools that are given to you. Don't be a schmuck. Use all the tools available. Now, as this is my own drawing, essentially my own design, I added a couple of little spots on the body. This was to break up the actual drawing itself and to add a little bit more color, I guess, when I colored it in. So I used the brighter skin tone that I used overall to not only edge highlight some of the edges around the worm, but also to paint those little specular spot things on the body. I also came back with some Magos purple and sprayed that mostly in the shadows. This is to create and force a lot more purple into the shadowed areas of the body, making it look, I don't know, a little bit more stretchy or something. I don't really know how to explain the words for this, but rather than try to explain things I don't understand, I will tell you what I do understand. The base needs to be painted, and in order to paint this base, of which I'm not gonna lie, my sculpting definitely needed to be adjusted for something like this, and I have learnt a lot since doing this, but this was my first try, so I'm gonna deal with the mess up that I made myself and struggle painting these things that don't really look like things, and it is what it is. I put most of the pieces together. As you may have noticed, I have masked off that piece for the light, and I'm gonna spray this as one unit. The reason I'm doing this is because if I sprayed them separately, there would be a very clear definition of where those highlights were sprayed essentially differently, and it would look weird. So I put them together in order to make sure that the highlights and shadows on this part literally look like they were done at the same time. That's because they were. Also on the base, I painted very simple colors, a light brown and then a dark brown, and then I used some washes to come back in and darken up just the back area of the model. This is going to create some depth and make it look like there is a little bit more depth, basically. The rocks, I just painted a mixture of grey and black in order to not be black. I also came back with that Posca pen and added some more highlights in certain areas, specifically around the top of the lamppost, as well as I put a little bit of graffiti that says "Thwip" on the base, because why wouldn't you? There is a couple of little rivets that hold whatever the frick that thing is on that lamppost to it, and so I decided to paint them with silver, which worked out fine for me. Don't forget to rim your base. Usually in black is a good idea, and after you've done that, you can start to put things together and see what the final result is kind of looking like. I decided to use something I haven't used in a long time, and that is those powdered pigment stuff on the base, just to give it a bit more je ne sais quoi. That's enough Greek talk, and now it's coming so close to the end. I can feel it. It's just right there. All I have to do is paint the Dectan. Yes, Dectan onto the symbol on his back. Then stick on that back, which is obviously a shell, onto him. And then the absolute final last thing is one more. I'm not gonna lie, there was 3 of these spiders that need to be painted white, and that was very frustrating. But once I've done the white on the base one, I can quickly and easily add a red ink over the top of that and put a battery into it, because it's got a battery in, and call it done. Obviously, it is now the end of the video. I think you know that because you're watching the hero shots. I don't know why they call them hero shots, but they call them that. And this is the hero shots of the video, but the true heroes are those over on the Patreon who have supported me, enabling me to do this kind of nonsense. Also, if you are considering joining the Patreon to get this file, you do not have to join at the highest tier. Every single Patreon will be getting this file, just as a thank you, I guess, for allowing me to do this kind of ridiculous stuff as a job. But at this point of the video, I do want to mention that everyone who has been watching, if you enjoyed it, thank you very much. Leave some words down below where YouTube gives you a space to leave those words. And when you're done doing that, make sure to wipe twice, wash your hands, and if you didn't like anything you saw, I don't really care. You can now fuck off.